Greetings, Clausewitz here. So this time I want to give you a summary and a tactical overview of the ancient Macedonian army under Philip II and Alexander the Great. And I really want to talk about the principles, like in the sense of ratio of the troops within the army and the tactical deployment or usage, and of course the army changed throughout the history. So they were in different sizes, they were arranged for different battles and fight in a different manner at specific times. But overall, when you really take the whole history under Philip II and Alexander the Great, because afterwards we are also in Macedonian army, but I don't talk about this, you will see the same principles in deployment, in the composition of the army, and also in their usage. And then in some battles you actually see like how they used those principles and just extended them or combined them with something else in the army to achieve a different tactic. And this is what I want to give you here, because if I would talk about what they did all the time, this would be like, I don't know, 2-hour video or whatever, and this doesn't make sense, I think. Really important here is what the army in its core should do and actually could do, so that you would then rearrange, recombinate, or actually change it a little bit, add new things later on, so to achieve the effectiveness for the circumstances you need, because in military it's all about circumstances. And so let us start. So let us first combine all the troops I've described in earlier videos. First the center, or you can also call it the phalanx, which consisted of the phalangites and, on their right, the shield bearers. Continuing with the right wing, we have the companion cavalry led by the king, and on their right side the peltasts, specifically the Agrian peltasts. Overseeing and protecting the right flank of the whole army, we have light cavalry in form of the Prodromi and Paeonian cavalry. In the left wing of the army we find the other heavy cavalry, the Thessalians, and on their left side the Thracian peltasts. To guard the left flank of the army, Thracian light cavalry were deployed. In front of the phalanx were the skirmishers in form of the Psylloi and Cretan archers. And behind the army we find the reserve. So let us talk now about the size of the army and their different troops. This is a hard topic because all the sources regarding the size of the army are from a time after Alexander the Great. But we can estimate the numbers. We know how they produced food, in which environment and climate they lived, and can compare our informations with statements in ancient sources. So I will go with some modern estimated numbers, which also fit with some of the sources. Specifically, I choose numbers for the size of Alexander's army when he left Greece to invade Persia. So his army were in summary around 35,000 men strong. The phalanx in the center consisted of around 12,000 men. The heavy cavalry were each 1,800 men, the light cavalry in the right wing were in summary 900 men, and in the left wing were 500. So now it gets tricky, because I couldn't find numbers for the peltasts or the skirmishers. I found some numbers for like garrison troops or like a form of reserve, but it wasn't clear. So I thought by myself I just will estimate the numbers by myself, based on the information I already have. So I mentioned earlier in the army were 35,000 men. So we already covered the cavalry with around 5,000 men. So that means we have 30,000 infantry left. We also covered the phalanx size with 12,000 men. So when we now look at the skirmishers in the front, they need to cover the whole battle line to defend them against other skirmishers, and of course to hit the whole enemy line with their missiles. This means we already need a couple of thousand men. Of course they were not in a tight formation, so they can cover the same area as the heavy infantry with fewer men. I estimated around 8,000 skirmishers for this job. Now regarding the peltasts, they need to protect the flanks of the cavalry and the army and later on to support them. So I thought like 3,000 men on each side sounds good. 1,000 would be too few, that would be even fewer than heavy cavalry. But 2,000 is also a good number. But I thought by myself they had an active combat role, and if like I had to choose if I would command the army, if I would have 2,000 or 3,000 peltasts, I would go with the 3,000. So 3,000 for them on each side. And now we have 4,000 men left for the reserve, which sounds also pretty reasonable. You can put 1,000 of them in a garrison and have still enough left to form a second line or guard the camp in an open field battle. Absolute numbers are not so important actually. The ratio of the troops is. Like I said, they always change the side throughout their wars but stick with the same composition. So now I'm displaying here the percentages of the troop types. So you can see that one quarter of the whole army would be the phalangites. Together with the shield bearers, the heavy infantry makes 1/3 of the army, which is pretty reasonable regarding that the phalanx had to bind and hold off the enemy and creating a safe zone in which light infantry and cavalry could retreat and also allow them to perform their movements. Now let's go over the tactics. After the skirmishing phase, if you don't know what skirmishing is, I explained it briefly in my video about light infantry of Macedon, and I will make a video about skirmishers, so don't worry. So when actually battle starts, the phalanx will advance, engage and bind the enemy. The cavalry would then advance, but with two different tasks. The Thessalians and their light cavalry would attack or intercept enemy cavalry. I would say they advance before the companions, so that the enemy attention would be focused on the Thessalians, so that the companions would have lesser opposition. Meanwhile, the companions and their support would outflank the enemy or right through a gap in the enemy formation to charge in the back or in the flanks, but mostly in the back of the enemy, routing parts of them or weakening the formation enough that the infantry would break through. The peltast would stay at the flanks at the start. They would protect the cavalry from surprising flanking attacks and later on protect and support the heavy infantry. The reserve would stay in their spot, making sure the safe zone stays intact so that infantry and cavalry could retreat there and move to another side of the battlefield if necessary. Also fighting off enemies which break through gaps or outflank the phalanx to attack their back or raid the camp. So these were the principles of Macedonian army under Philip II and Alexander the Great. It's not very complicated, but like I said, you can change certain deployment or alter and extend the tasks of some troops to follow a different tactic and to accomplish victory. Depending on the circumstances, of course. Hope you enjoyed this video. If so, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you not already did. I talk a lot about stuff like that and will be even more in the future. And I will make one last video about this army. It's funny, like how I planned just with the heavy cavalry video would be my last video, and now I make 2 additional more. But yeah, it's appropriate. And in this last video I will talk about like the pros and cons of this army. I mentioned already like 1 or 2 pros or so, and you can actually see it for yourself somehow, but I will like make it more in detail or what I actually see as a pro, as a con, and even give my opinion specifically to it, like what I really think of it, what I would maybe change and how I can actually imagine to defeat this army. And yeah, and maybe even something like what consequences it's had in military history or so. I'm not sure about this. Basically we'll ramble a little bit more about the army in the next video than in the previous ones. And yeah, this is it, and so I hopefully see you soon.